Liz, it's February 2020, and you just received a major promotion, right? I mean, you're about to. I think in some ways, based on our previous conversations, you're coming into convergence. All your experience is coming into exactly where you wanted to be in your career. You're about it, but within the next couple of months of taking on this big role, and I love you to tell us about the big role and what you're doing. But we also hit a global pandemic. What was that like coming into convergence, assuming a dream role, and then you have a blueprint and it's disrupted, by forces way beyond your control?
Exactly. It was exactly everything that you just described. So I became one of four co-heads, global co-heads of CA's brand consultancy. So currently about 200 people around the globe working with brands as their strategic partner, and was very excited to move in as one of four co-heads. Although filled with anxiety and everything
Yeah.
that comes along with taking on a new role, but knew that the time was right for me in my life and what I had worked for many years. But then the pandemic hit, and what we realized very quickly was there was a whole group of people that we had to get to know and connect with and get to trust us. And we had to do it virtually. We couldn't get on planes and go and meet them and make those connections. And for me, my role has always been about studying culture and the consumer and creating strategy from that. So human interaction is a big part of how I connect and where I feel comfortable. And, really, I have to give credit to the partnership of the four of us to really start to lean into best-in-class technology to ensure that we were going to kind of shepherd this group through this difficult time. And at the same time, break down some of our biggest challenges. Was that we were a global team that was working very siloed. So we were able to, kind of leverage the technology to handle some challenges that we might not have found ourselves able to do as quickly had we not all been it was an even playing field all of a sudden. We were all connected and in the same virtual office. But there was a lot of long days, a lot of sleepless nights. So all of those realities. And it was it was a lesson for me, who has really lived a lot of my career segmenting my life quite a bit, where I was able to separate my personal life from my work life too. And now everyone's lives were completely, didn't have the beauty of that separation. But then I think in the end, we all realized that there was never beauty in that. And that, kind of our identities and being on full display was a relief in many ways, because of course, not only was every leader juggling the struggles at work, but we were juggling with our own struggles at home.
Yeah, I love that. And I love you. There's so many ways, so many different themes that I pick up on, right? And so one of your superpowers, the way I perceive it, is communication and culture, right? And so you talked about jumping on a plane. Did they say, what is it, 80% of communication is nonverbal, right? You just go into a room with somebody, you feel the energy, that's gone, right? I mean, it's not even an option, right? You have the budgets for it, you could do it, it's just not an option. How difficult was that to kind of make that transition of forging those authentic relationships?
It was, I think it was difficult, but we all learned, and I think it was through vulnerability, to learned how to use this technology to connect with one another. And I remember it was interesting hearing from some of the agents within CAA speak to, for younger talent that they were going after, their negotiation actually ended up becoming quite shorter than it normally would, because they were talking to an athlete, a talent of some other sort in their home environment where they were relaxed and they were able to build trust. So I took little bits of information. I do think that it was quite a time of taking as much information and learnings from people as you could, and then applying it to your business. So I do remember having a lot of conversations early on with other leaders and what they were finding and how we could apply it to what we were trying to do. And to me, that made me realize, okay, with our younger employees, and we have a lot of them, this might be a time where we uncover talent from someone who maybe didn't feel as comfortable in an in-office experience, and preferred smaller groups, one-on-one conversations. And so as much as possible, we tried to navigate individuals, certainly each office in its own way, and then bring everyone together when we could. But we found a lot of different methodologies. And I still think we're now navigating, what does the hybrid look like? Because we're not going back to just what it was. And so we're almost creating a new reality again. And I think the biggest challenge is the culture of CAA is an incredible thing. It's what brought me back here the second time. But for recruiting in and hiring during this time, we didn't have that connectivity. We had to get people to trust us, and we had to try and create what is part of walking within the walls of CA, and some of the magic, at least that I feel is there. How do we create that virtually? So we spent a lot of time focused on, okay, what are the key values of our group, and how do we make sure we're bringing them to life every day? And I think what we hadn't done early on, and then really started to focus on, how do we call out those values in action when we see them happening? So when we see collaboration, when we see curiosity, accountability, those values, when we see them in action, even in this virtual world that we've created, how do we call them out and multiply and amplify them?
I love that. You also touched on the word vulnerability, which I think is so super important. You made a lot of courageous decisions in your career. You challenged a lot of status quos. It's not been a linear career, right? You've done a lot of interesting things. It sounds like in some ways you followed your heart, right? This was interesting to me. I had a passion here. I want to explore that. Your curious mind, which I love about you. Were there any guidelines that you had to come up with, or maybe on the spot, of like, how much vulnerability do you share? When do you share it? Is there any wisdom around that developed?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially early on in my career, and again, this is at a time, I mean, it's sometimes I have to remind myself how far we have come in terms of women in the workplace. But and I'm not saying that this was the right way to behave, but I do think I was not used to bringing my personal life, any vulnerability, any weakness to the forefront. And taking on this role, it was probably, I realized that showing my vulnerability and what I was experiencing personally, as well as of course professionally for the team, was going to be more important than ever for connection, real connection. And I mean, that's just obviously one of many cultural crises that we were all living through and experiencing. And I realized that I was not going to be leading if we were constantly getting on with messages of positivity and we're going to get through this. It had to be, we have to hurt together. And that was, I think, it pushed me. I think this role has pushed me in ways, one, because of the cultural realities of the time, and two, because of the role, has pushed me in ways that I had not been pushed before. And when I took over this role, the four of us all took kind of leadership assessment, that then they reported back to us like, okay, these are real strengths of yours. Let's lean in. And mine came back, not surprisingly, that I need time to process, meaning I won't always voice in a room because I want, especially the researcher in me, the analyst in me always likes to make sure that I have all the pieces before I state like how I feel about something or my recommendation on how we can move forward. And sometimes that serves me really well, but I realized in this time that sometimes that's not going to be possible. And
right.
voicing, having an opinion, and trusting just what I know, based on my years of experience and what I do feel in my heart, I do follow that a lot, was going to be important. So I think that's an area that I pushed myself. Like, you're not always going to have time to do all the research and evaluation that you want. Things are moving too quickly. Human connection doesn't always operate at the speed of business. Right. And so I had to, that's another area I think of, if we're tying it to the theme of letting go, that I had to let go and trust myself more than I have in the past.
I love that, letting go. And that it sounds like you were developing some very powerful intuitive leadership skills. Like you were developing, like trusting yourself, trusting that inner voice, figuring it all out. I'm on the right track with that. That you're going more on instinct on occasion than
I think because it was out of necessity. I think there just wasn't time. And truthfully, a lot of times other leaders are doing that better. And I didn't want to lose my voice in a conversation, with a client, a colleague, anything. So that was one area for me that I've worked on quite a bit, finding a voice that felt very true to me, but, needed to move a little faster and on instinct.
Yeah, because you referenced that you had some tough days, right? There were also some hard days in this, and there's some days you were hurting together. The words coming out for me is like dark nights of the soul, right? You're taking on this role and you're like, wow, I'm dealing with a lot right now. What was some feedback you got internally and externally with partners and clients that what were some of your favorite feedback moments that kind of let you know that, you know what, this is working, I'm on the right path? This style of leadership is connecting.
Certainly, and it took time. I mean, this might be an exaggeration, but up to a year to really feel like, but along the way, we would get enough internal feedback from our team. And sometimes it was just, thank you for putting that note. And we would use a platform that allowed us, to share a thought, a Friday wrap up with the entire team. And sometimes it could just be one person that said, I thank you. Like, I feel so seen today, or I needed that. Or, we definitely paid quite a bit of attention to mental wellness during that time, and recognizing when, we actually need to give people the time and space that they need right now. So taking work off of people's plates, giving them time off or whatever they needed. It was normally the personal connections that we saw, which was difficult to see when you're working virtually. So we had to work very diligently to make sure we were, dividing up the team and making sure that everyone was connecting with someone. So I think the personal connections were very helpful to me, to be like at the end of the day. And then the client connections, I think the day we started to really see, knock on wood, a lot of new business coming in, and realizing, we set out to break down silos of our team, to bring in whole, areas of expertise across different areas that we knew brands were going to need help with. moving forward. So we started to see a change in our, the makeup of our team and the skill sets, and watching, the ecosystem of brand consulting, and then of course how it connects to the CA ecosystem at large. It took time, but when we started to see it, it was very encouraging.
Incredibly rewarding is what's going to
It was really rewarding.
Yeah.
And it was great to then identify, other leaders. We really have focused on everyone is a leader in some way, and how can we develop them to bring out their leadership, and how they can help steer us forward as well. So as we started to see that momentum, and then of course the business impact is what you're always looking at as well. When we saw the business impact, it was definitely a powerful momentum that we wanted to continue to ride. Now, of course, with the realities of the world right now, I think we're in a better place than ever to be prepared for what might lie ahead. And that feels like so much more security than February of 2020, which is a good feeling.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's some shock leadership skills you developed, right? You and your team and your company and your partners, whatever. It's not when something comes your way, you kind of have that inner feeling or resolve that you can figure it out. Am I on the right track with that? Is that
you are? And I think going back to that vulnerability, I think we called it out in the moments that we didn't get it right.
Interesting. Okay.
And so
raw honesty too, and vulnerability.
I can't even think of a big example of something that we're like, that was a miss. We needed that communication to go out earlier, or guess what? We tried something organizationally, structurally within the team, and it wasn't right. So we're going to readjust. I think allowing our team, and with still leading them, but saying, this is something we actually feel like we might have gotten wrong, and we're going to adjust accordingly, I think also helped quite a bit build trust. Because at the end of the day, no one had ever navigated a time like this. So it was inevitable that mistakes, or I won't even call them mistakes, that we would do some things that wouldn't help us and have to adjust. And again, going back to that flexibility and vulnerability, were two things that we had to embrace, which isn't always, which can be uncomfortable. And I hate the phrase because I think it's used a lot, but getting comfortable being uncomfortable was something we spent a lot of time doing.
I know, I get it. I love it. I mean, I love this style of courageous leadership, right? Because as a leader, you make decisions. Often, not everyone will agree with that decision, but there seems to be a fair exchange of trust, saying, we're going to make this decision, but if we're wrong, we're going to readjust. If we need to make adjustments, we're going to readjust. That seems to breed a lot of trust amongst the team members as well, saying, hey, it's some humility even. Hey, you know what? We made a decision. We could be wrong. We'll adjust if need be. Is that feeling right to you?
It absolutely was. And I don't think that we realized that at first. And it would be normally when we started to see something not quite working out, we would, I don't think we ever moved in to adjust things too quickly. We usually would wait, try and, we never wanted to then reverse course too quickly. But I do think that vulnerability, and also keep in mind there are four of us, which is great. We all come from different perspectives on the business. But it took us some time to figure out how are we leading all authentically for ourselves, but with a collective voice. And that took some time to work on. And for me personally, it was about how can I lead in a way that's authentic to me, but also be part of this foursome, and not and allow myself to be vulnerable, allow myself to be partner. You're actually better than that than I am, so you should take it. I think there was a fair amount of that, and that was not easy at first. And I think that's something we've all worked on. And in many ways now moving forward, it is about recognizing there are younger people on the team that are going to understand and embrace new technology more easily than me, especially in translating what it means to brands. So really calling out when I don't know something and pulling in someone who knows more is something I do quite a bit of these days.
I love that. And you said, it wasn't easy initially to say, you know what, I'm not good at this. I'm going to hand off the ball. You do that. I'll take this. Why wasn't that easy with your three other
I
peers?
think it had nothing to do with them. It still is a very supportive leadership team, but we all had just been named to this role.
Yeah,
And, you know, of course, you all want to impress.
right.
You want to impress, you want to live up to your expectations of your team as well as your own expectations, and don't want to, not feel like you are embracing this leadership and leading just as much as every other um, member of the leadership team. So I think that was just it, just saying, and taking the time for us to evaluate, myself included, what am I really good at?
Right.
You know,
Right.
what and how does that value both our team members and the business? And that kind of soul searching, like I said earlier, we did all of this assessment, and you get this assessment back, and it kind of pushes you to lean into what you're good at and also get comfortable with what you're not good at. Um, and that second part can be very hard.
No, exactly. I love that because, it sounds like you had to make a series of courageous and vulnerable decisions with your other three peers, right? Maybe they were making decisions as well, right? You weren't the only one, maybe in their own ways. Everyone had to let down the guard a little bit and show some of their cards and say, hey, we're playing as a team now, right? Like we either play as a team or, we win as a team or we don't win as a team, but right, we have to come together. What do you think the relationship is between vulnerability and creativity? When you embrace vulnerability,
Well, I mean,
your
it's part of
relationship,
the reason, and as you know from my work at the Female Quotient,
right?
very much focused on inclusion. And for me, an inclusive environment, a true inclusive environment and culture at a company allows people to be vulnerable, which in turn allows for more creativity. I don't think having diversity of everything at the table is enough, which is why going back to all the work that we did on making people feel connected,
Right.
seeing all of the, and let me be clear, that's ongoing work.
Yeah.
I would not proclaim that we have nailed that by any means. It's constant work, work that we do every day. We bring in outside consultants, all of that. But vulnerability, I think, comes from feeling included and part of something, and recognizing that I am a piece of this. I'm an important piece of this puzzle, and my piece is just as important to what the group is trying to achieve. And that allows for creativity. And I've actually, looked at a lot of studies that have proven that from research that people with creative capabilities and skills, if not in an inclusive environment, are not able to produce
Yeah.
amazing creative thought leadership.
Well, in a safe environment as well. I think the word that's coming out for me
Yes.
is safe, right? Like
Yeah.
that kind of builds trust. I mean, look, you have a senior role at a legendary company, right? Creative artist agency, legendary company. For those of you out there who haven't read the book Powerhouse, highly recommend it. It's a great read. It's an awesome read. I loved it. It was like drama. It was everything. It was fabulous. And you're part of that chapter, right? Going back to 1975, you're part of that chapter. You're coming out, I mean, whatever this new normal is, or whatever the term we want to use, if it's a shock economy, I don't know what it is. We're in for a few more, I suspect. Do you feel the weight of that brand at all as you're continuing the legacy? Do you feel the weight of that excellence and the pioneering work that's been done within your world and your fingerprints on continuing?
Part of the reason I wanted to return to CAA is for many reasons, but one being, and I'm biased, I have to say I'm biased, but I do think it's the best of the best. And I think that they find a lot of incredibly, like I feel so grateful to be here, because I do think that the weight of the brand and the people, really it's all about the people in the building, the virtual building. I learn from them, and I think it pushes everyone to be better when you're surrounded by people that are incredibly passionate, creative, and pushing themselves every day. So there's certainly, I think, weight that comes with that, but there's also incredible pride that I think brings leaders together. I think that the company also is working very hard to bring different divisions together, recognizes kind of the fluidity of the world, especially how the world engages with brands, a lot of different areas of CAA touch brands, and how can we collectively come together for, new solutions, new offerings to help and aid brands in their needs and objectives. So that in and of itself, and how they lead a company, has been empowering. And yes, there's certainly weight in it, but I think that for me personally, it has been more about the pride and living up to what the brand represents in the marketplace.
I love that. I think your best days are ahead of you, right? I mean, I think you guys are coming out of this stronger. I think your clients are thriving. You're seeing that. I mean, I just love the fact you've torn down so many walls. And it sounds like you have to fight for that. Like you said, you can't rest on your laurels, right? You got to fight for those walls to be torn down. You have to fight to hear people's opinions. Is that true, that you have to, on some level,
I think,
create that space and creep? Yeah,
I think it is constantly, especially with our, if we just look at our division, which is about 200 people, that's 200 people with different dreams, different career goals, all working towards, a common mission and objective, but keeping everyone focused on the same objective while developing them as individuals is something that we spend quite a bit of time on. And a lot of our focus over the last several months has been on, kind of what is our development plan, and how do we impact every person at every point in their career. And that takes a lot of intention. And I think that, when we opened up today, I mentioned, like, I have found, like, there's no just showing up to, like, I have to show up with intention every day and remind myself, what is the end game? What is the end goal? And at the same time, pick my head up enough to say, what does 3 years look like from now? What is 5 years?
Manage both the present and the future.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that's been a challenge, especially because culture seems to be, it's just, the world is changing every day. And we're not sure exactly how to plan, but, like I said earlier, we feel better and more secure than we did in February of 2020, which is, I love
that. Final two questions for you, which is, what would you have told your younger self, knowing where you are in your career right now? What would you have told your younger self, and how do you recharge now that all the boundaries in between your personal life and your work life have been severely altered? And a lot of people are trying to wrestle with this. How do you recharge? How do you create space for yourself? Leading from the front, right?
The first part of the question, in terms of what I would have told my younger self, is 100% absolutely. I would have looked back and started to see what do I really love, and what do I not love, or what am I good at and what am I not good at, and had more intentionality around those things. At the same time, I would tell my younger self that things don't always go as you had planned, and letting go and having a little trust and faith is important. Okay. Because it truly is what you make of a certain situation that can make all of the difference. But I do wish I had looked back earlier and seen kind of the commonality in the roles that I was drawn to. And I think it would have maybe eliminated a few stops that I made along the way had I done that. But again, I am a firm believer that you you learn, grow your experience and your network in any experience. So I don't think any was completely unvaluable. And I also wish I had trusted myself, that I had, I think imposter syndrome is still a real thing. I just,
Really?
and
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, not just for a lot of people. And
I
I think
agree.
that
Yeah.
I suffer probably on my bad days, I still suffer from it. But I think I look back at my career, and there was another time where I was asked if I wanted to take over running a much smaller division of CAA. This was when I was here the first time.
Yeah.
And at that time in my life, I said no. I was like, I didn't feel like I could do it.
Yeah.
So when I was given the opportunity a second time, and certainly not apples to apples, because this was a much bigger role, bigger division, everything. But I didn't hesitate for 1 second. And so I would tell my younger self and anyone out there who might be listening, trust yourself and trust the person sitting on the other side of the table, or whoever you're having the conversation with, because often they might see something in you that you didn't see, and or that you don't see yet. And I have that conversation with a lot of young people on our team now, like that something I see in them, and I want to help bring out in them, trust those people, that they might see talent somewhere in you that you didn't see, and trust those people, and shut that voice up in your head that's telling you can't do anything. And Shelley Zallis, who I worked for, not once, but twice, who runs the female quotient, she used to always say that about shutting. She would say, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on tape, because it's true. We can be our own worst enemies. And then in terms of recharging, you have to work hard to take time for yourself, but spending time with my family is a big part of recharging for me, and it's probably what really helps me the most. And I've gotten better about setting boundaries for that.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I love
that. It is
that.
about setting boundaries, and I was definitely guilty of being a complete people pleaser all the time, and recognizing that it was coming at the cost of people that are, the most important in the world to me. So I've been much better about setting boundaries, which benefit me as much as my kids and my husband.
Does guilt come with boundaries sometimes? Do you feel guilt?
Yes. And I think that I'm also working, I guess I have a lot to work on, but I'm also working on guilt quite a bit, because I think it prevents you from being present, and really accomplishing what you need to do, probably in a shorter amount of time. And luckily now my kids are all at an age where I can have conversations with them and let them know, like, I have to complete this and then we can go do this. Harder when they were younger, certainly. But yeah, I think that it is hard not to feel guilt, but it's something we all have to work on. And I think when we're truly passionate and engaged in something, it becomes easier to lose that guilt. But at the end of the day, I've never believed in balance. I think it is truly about integrating areas of your life in a way that works for you.
I love that. I heard somebody once say that balance doesn't exist, so that person focused on abundance. Okay,
Yeah.
my life right now needs abundance. And I love what you said about calling out qualities in people. It sounds like to me like part of your leadership style is you speak identity over people, right? You're seeing something and because that's what's happened in my life. Somebody said something, I'm like, wow, I never saw myself that way. It's like it becomes part of my identity. It's so much more powerful than me. And I love mantras and I love affirmations. I love all that stuff. But somebody says, Ruben, I see you as, or I experienced this. That's pretty powerful stuff, right? I mean, have you experienced that? Have you see people
Yeah,
thrive?
absolutely. And I think that that's been exciting to me in that my years spent studying consumers and their behaviors, being able to take that experience and knowledge and um, now applying it to running a team of individuals, um, for me has been empowering, because again, it was about connecting the dots, finding skills that I have and applying them to the role that I'm in now. Yeah. And maybe that's a better way of saying what I would have told my younger self. Like, make sure you're constantly mining your toolkit, your personal toolkit, and applying it to whatever role or task is currently in front of you. Because I think that sometimes we take on a new role and it looks and feels completely different than anything we've done in the past. And when you really break it down, there's usually something in your toolkit that's going to apply to this situation.
Yeah, that's right. And you've been collecting all these tools. And you're like, oh, yeah, that experience, I thought that was a failure. Oh, I guess now I get to use it, right? Like, right, it gets repurposed. I love that. And it sounds like, too, with your intentionality, is that, do you ever ask yourself the question when you're in front of somebody, who do they need me to be right now? Like, how do I need to show up in this moment for that person? What I'm trying to say is leadership has become more fluid, more personal.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it can be very easy, and I myself was guilty of at times trying to be a leader that I, like, in my head had identified as a leader, like, you know, kind of a leader is tough and is going to, you know, kind of be the loudest voice in a room, and that wasn't. So yes, I do think we have to, you know, adjust to whoever we're having a conversation with, engage. I also think, and again, it's overused at this point, but being true to yourself and how you prefer to show up is also, there's leadership in every single style and personality. So yes, I do think you have to be fluid and personal in your leadership, but you also have to be true to yourself, or people will see right through it. You know, it wouldn't be, there are certain behaviors that just would not be authentic to me, and it would be very clear to anyone I was trying to communicate with. The message would be lost. There was one more point that I wanted to make, and that is that in this time, especially because it was easy to sometimes communicate, and actions were more difficult. However, actions are going to speak louder than any communication that you can make to your team. So oftentimes we found that it was through concrete actions, either for our team or for our clients, that was going to be much more impactful. So for example, waiting for the results of something we were doing and presenting those results and amplifying them was key to building trust, driving change. And, you know, a lot of the work that we're currently doing around inclusion, we're really waiting for, you know, to roll things out before even talking about it. You know, you don't want a 6-month lead time of where you're talking about something that's not happening. So that's a long-winded way of saying that actions were crucial to us during this time.
I love that, because like talk is cheap, or can be. Let me rephrase that. Talk can be cheap, right? And I love where you're going with that, because I think people are looking for that type of like, is there hypocrisy? There's a lot of cynicism out there, and maybe rightfully so on some level, right? But people are looking for like, okay, you said you were going to do this. And like you said, if there's like a 6-month window, either it kills the enthusiasm that was there initially, or that it allows for that cynicism to fester. Is that what you're saying? So like when you're saying like, hey, we're going to say it and we're going to do it, you're kind of you're just capturing that momentum and building people's trust is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in the last, couple of years where people were working remotely, some of them in their apartments or their homes, they weren't feeling connected. And so they needed to feel something. And so there were a lot of actions that we took because we found a lot of times we actually would track kind of drop off in how much engagement we were getting, on the software that we were using to connect us all. So anyway, it's just one point that I definitely remind myself of, like, stop talking, Liz, go do something and then come back and share the results, especially because you are going to, not everyone is always going to agree with the decisions that you're making.
Right.
So, sometimes it does take, go do it, prove the success of it, and come back and talk about it then.
Which also ties into your earlier point, which was, hey, if for some reason we were off on a decision, we're willing to lead with, hey, we can readjust, right? So, hey, we're asking you to trust us. We're taking our best guess on this. We're going to lead, but if we're wrong, we're going to readjust.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And what we've tried to encourage then in the leaders on our team, like, we have full faith in you and trust. And that was something, because the four of us all came together and we had been very much embedded in the business. In order for us to, A, really lead this group, B, let other people lead, we had to pull ourselves out to allow others room to grow and trust them. And so that's been a big, I think when we're willing to accept mistakes, it allows them to lead in a way that they want to, and recognize that, yes, sometimes they're not always going to get it right. So it gives them that permission that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and cover is a word that's coming up for me. It also gives them cover. Like, hey, I can take some risks. I'm covered. My boss and my leadership team, they're supportive of me taking some risk. Am I on the right track?
That's a very good point. And we constantly reinforce that there is cover. We will support them, both internally and externally with clients, that their success and well-being is our number one concern.
I had a boss once who told me, like, if you make a bold decision and you can prove that you weren't negligent, you'll probably keep your job. Yeah. If it was negligence, that's a different story. But if you take bold decisions and you can prove, like, I did it on the best data I had, I took a big risk, these were the reasons I did it, then we're going to find ways to reward that. And that was very...
That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a perfect way of saying it.